5 months ago, I started seriously testing a setup. Using an iPad as the only display for a Mac Mini, so the Mac Mini can work without a traditional monitor. In today's video, I'm going to do two things. First, I'll show you step by step how to use an iPad as the only display for a Mac Mini. Second, I'll share my real experience after using this setup for a period of time, including the pros, the cons, and my final conclusion. Welcome to Paperless Lab. I'm your guide to paperless workflows and iPad productivity. Throughout 2026, I'll spend the entire year systematically explaining paperless learning on iPad, how the iPad can temporarily replace a computer, and how to fully use the iPad for creativity and productivity. If you're interested in this kind of content, feel free to follow the channel. Alright, let's start with the most important and most mature part. Step 1. Using the iPad as a display for the Mac Mini. On the iPad, open the App Store, search for Yam Display, and download it. After the download finishes, launch it, and then we'll move on to preparing the Mac Mini. On the Mac Mini, open a browser, go to the official Yam Display website, and download the Mac client. Once the download is complete, install it following the normal installation process. After installation, open macOS system settings. First, go to General and find Login Items. Add a Yam Display there to make sure it can run properly. Next, go to Privacy and Security. Find Screen and System Audio Recording and add Yam Display. Then, on the same page, find Accessibility and add Yam Display as well. These 3 steps are critical. If you miss any one of them, the display may not work properly. At this point, you'll notice another issue. After the Mac Mini shuts down and restarts, you need to blindly type your password on the keyboard before the image appears on the iPad. To fix this, go back to Privacy and Security in macOS System Settings. Turn off File Vault. Then go to Users and Groups. Select Automatic Login and enter your password. Now we can start connecting everything. First, power on the Mac Mini. Use a USB-C cable. The iPad's original charging cable works perfectly fine. Connect one end to the Mac Mini and the other end to the iPad. Open Yam Display on the iPad. After a few seconds, you'll see the full macOS desktop appear on the iPad. You can adjust the settings by tapping the Yam Display icon in the top right corner of the iPad screen. For example, you can choose different resolutions to match the iPad's screen size. You can also adjust the frame rate. Of course, you should select 60 frames per second. In the preferences, you can also enable automatic launch at login and automatic software updates. Now let's verify the basic usage experience. Open Finder. Open Safari and scroll through a web page. Drag windows around and switch between apps. You'll notice that the experience is smooth and stable, not like a choppy or a laggy remote desktop session. Next, let's test touch input. Open apps using your finger. Scroll through web pages using touch. You'll find that macOS can be operated through touch on the iPad. Although this isn't native touchscreen support in macOS, in real-world use, it genuinely feels like a touchscreen version of macOS. Next, let's talk about input methods. If you don't want to carry an extra mouse and keyboard, the simplest solution is to attach a keyboard case to the iPad. Whether it's Apple's Magic Keyboard or a third-party keyboard, for example, my Logitech Combo Touch, they all work. Once the iPad is mounted, you get a setup that feels very similar to a laptop. You type with both hands on the keyboard, use the trackpad with your right hand, and interact directly with the touchscreen when needed. However, one thing to note is that the iPad's keyboard and trackpad sometimes prioritize iPadOS behavior, which can lead to misoperations. For the best experience, it's still recommended to use an external keyboard and mouse connected directly to the Mac Mini. At this point, the tutorial portion is complete. Now I want to share my most honest experience after using this setup for an extended period. The first obvious advantage is performance headroom. In the same editing and multitasking scenarios, the Mac Mini feels noticeably more capable. Even when the iPad is used as the only display, performance is not affected. The second advantage is system completeness. You're using the full version of macOS, not remote control. Your original workflow barely needs to change. The third advantage is the independence of the iPad. When you no longer need macOS, simply unplug the cable, and the iPad instantly returns to iPadOS. This is something a MacBook with an external display simply cannot do. But now we have to talk about the downsides. The first downside is the higher preparation cost. You need to bring the Mac Mini, the iPad, cables, and possibly a stand, keyboard, and mouse. If you value instant grab-and-go usage, a MacBook is still more convenient. The second downside is a longer startup process. A MacBook is ready as soon as you open the lid, while this setup requires power, connections, and launching the app. The third downside is its reliance on a desk. It works better in environments like cafes or hotel desks, and is not suitable for standing use or very tight spaces. The fourth downside is the lack of a built-in battery. This means you can only use it where a power outlet is available, and it cannot truly be used anywhere. The fifth downside is slightly higher display latency. The frame rate does not meet the needs of long working sessions or professional design work. Now let's talk about something many people care about: powering the Mac Mini with a power bank. I did try this, but I did not adopt it as a long-term solution. During real-world use, noise and stability issues made me uncomfortable, so I decided to return the power bank and stop pursuing this approach. I'm not saying powering a Mac Mini with a power bank is impossible. What I'm saying is that if you want to treat it as a primary solution, you must do extensive testing. Until stability is fully verified, I do not recommend copying this setup directly. Finally, let's return to the core question. Can a Mac Mini plus iPad replace a MacBook? For me, it cannot fully replace one, but it doesn't need to. A MacBook is more like a grab-and-go, hassle-free tool. The Mac Mini plus iPad, on the other hand, feels more like a more powerful mobile desktop. If you already own an iPad, if you spend most of your time working at fixed locations with only occasional movement, and if you care more about performance and system stability, this setup is absolutely worth trying. But if you commute every day, if you dislike cables and setup, and if you value an all-in-one experience, then you should simply choose a MacBook. 5 months later, I'm still using the iPad as the only display for my Mac Mini. But I do not use a power bank as a long-term primary power solution. It's not a MacBook. But if I had to give it a name, I'd rather call it MacPad. If you've tried a similar setup, or if you found a more stable power solution, feel free to share your experience in the comments. If you're interested in the accessories shown in this video, you can find the links below. If you found this helpful, please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.